Hi, and welcome to the Mom and Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On this episode, I am joined by Alli, who is an entrepreneur, community builder, and a passionate advocate for parents navigating the complexities of modern life. She is sharing with us her story through severe postpartum depression, what that was like for her, how she found her way out, and some of the really real details of what things felt like for her. She is a mom of two young girls, and her journey is deeply personal. After battling postpartum depression, she turned her challenges into an opportunity to create a supportive space for parents everywhere. And she is talking with us about Beacon, an innovative platform that reimagines how families connect through meaningful playdates. And Allie's on a mission to make parenthood less isolating and more fulfilling. And you'll hear through her story how much she went through, what she eventually came to understand about herself, and what was going on for her, and just why she values community so much. And we know for sure that having peer support, having community is one of the things that helps people get out of things like postpartum depression. And that was certainly true for Alli. So let's dive in and hear Alli's story. Welcome, Alli. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you on too. You're doing really cool things in the world. And I do love a story of people going through a lot and feeling like it's potentially the worst thing they've been through, and then turning that around and helping other people. Certainly, not everybody needs to do that or can do that or wants to, but I think it's really cool when those things align. So, yeah, just let us know about your journey and start wherever you'd like to.
Sure. So let me start by saying I guess I was never one of those people who was called to motherhood, where I didn't grow up thinking, oh, I'm going to be a mom someday. And it was like in my head as this will be a pivotal moment. In fact, there were times where I questioned whether or not I had the mom gene, as I called it,
Mm.
that I didn't know if it was in the cards for me. And eventually I met my husband, my partner, and the pieces came together not as clearly, but they started to shift into place that yes, this was something I wanted to do. But for me, I always thought that it would be part of my story that I would have a child and then I would go back to being just me, Allie, and that it would be not a detour, but a stop along the way and just a little blip. And then I would go back to the regularly scheduled programming, if you
Right.
will. And my story, I think, for me, really hones in on this idea that there is no such thing that when you have children, at least in my experience, that you start this next chapter, you don't bounce back, you
Right.
bounce forward.
Mhm.
And your story changes, the key players change, and you don't know what you didn't know. So for me, I guess it was very naive to think that, oh, my kids, I'll pick them up along the way and then they'll continue with me. And going through what I did and not having very easy pregnancies from a physical standpoint and a health standpoint. And then
Mhm.
after giving birth, going through what was for me very severe postpartum depression, it shook me to my core, I guess is the best way that I could explain it, that it
Right.
challenged every preconceived notion I had, not just about becoming a mother, but about who I was, who I am as a person. And I was not prepared for such a profound identity crisis on top of identifying and going through how will I parent, how will I be a mom to this new person in the world. It was also am who I thought I am, like it was a
Right.
very
Right.
existential
Totally.
crisis.
Wow. Yeah. I think a lot of people can identify with that. It just can hit you like a wave.
Yeah, or hit you like a ton of bricks. Like I
Right.
felt that it
Right.
wasn't just the wave, that I was brought under the wave, that I was
Mm.
completely
Yeah.
drowned. And so my story of becoming a parent and going through postpartum depression, I'd say it really hinges for me, the entire thing, on that it was reevaluating who I am as a person. And every
Mhm.
step along the way was not just about, oh, I need to get through this for my children, but it was questioning my identity. When I was pregnant, I went through several things. Thankfully, but my children were both very healthy when I was pregnant with them, Pilar. But I had edema, I had hypertension, I
Mhm.
gained way, way more than the recommended amount of weight. And I was just very uncomfortable and miserable. And
Yeah.
it was not the glow that I had thought it was going to be. And for my first pregnancy, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was perinatal depression. I just thought this was pregnancy is uncomfortable. And I chalked it up to that. And it wasn't until after the fact that I realized, oh, wait, that wasn't the quote unquote norm. So I went through with my first daughter, I was induced at 37 weeks because I had hypertension and wasn't ready. I'm a very prepared person. I have my lists and I have my schedule, and 3 weeks leading up, none of that was done. So I went to a doctor's appointment and my doctor was like, I think, based on what I'm seeing here, your blood pressure, we should go have you checked out. And on the side, he had said to my husband, so you're not leaving the hospital without a baby. Just to be clear, that's probably what's happening here.
You didn't hear that part?
I did not hear that part.
Okay.
When I was checked into the hospital, and it was already like the plan was out the window. And for someone who's type A planner and career obsessed and all of the things, this was the first, the spidey senses went up that, so this is not a scripted scenario. And so was checked into the hospital at 37 weeks, was induced, wound up not being able to have a natural birth, which was on the list of what I'd wanted. I also didn't want an epidural, but couldn't necessarily, my body was not built for the non-epidural route. So everything very quickly changed from the plan to plan versus reality.
Yeah.
And gave birth. My daughter was super, super tiny. She was born at 5 pounds, 11 ounces. Literally was able to hold her in the palm of my hand. And the moment when they laid her on my chest, I was expecting this fall in love moment. And
that's what they say.
That's what they say, that they give you the baby. And that did not happen for me. And granted, I was on all the good meds at the time, but it did not happen. And little by little, like being at the hospital, being discharged, there was no course correction. I went deeper and deeper down that road of things weren't right. So I had wanted to breastfeed. In my mind, it was always, I'm going to breastfeed. I can grow the baby. I want to be able to take care of the baby. That was an experience that I'd wanted. And that did not work out for me either. I did not have the supply. And I hired a lactation consultant. I rented the medical grade pump. I took all of the teas and the cookies and every last thing. I power pumped. I was attached to that machine for way too much time.
So much work.
So much work. And that was another thing on the list that didn't work out with my perfect plan. So the birthing story was not the perfect plan. The initial nice to meet you moment was not the perfect plan. The recovery, awful. Anyone who's had birth in no situation is fun. And if someone out there has had fun, I'd love to hear that story. But I did not have fun. And then I wasn't able to feed my baby in the way that I had wanted. And it was like one thing after the other.
Right.
And it went very quickly into what I now understand is baby blues. But because it was my first child, and I am not close to anyone or that close to anyone who had children in a short amount of time near me, I didn't know what was right and what was wrong. And I know we shouldn't use right and wrong, but what's the expectation?
Common.
But yeah, what's common, exactly. And so the baby blues very quickly turned into postpartum depression, but I didn't know it. And my husband definitely didn't know it because when you're a new parent, you're sleep deprived, you're figuring out, like, did I put the diaper on right? And, if I give the baby a bath, am I going to break her if I move her the wrong way in the bath? And it took months months of me slipping deeper and deeper. And as a type A person who always likes to be in control, which I'm working on, work in progress in that area, I wasn't able to see the warning signs.
How would you have known? Had anybody explained to you what they were?
No, not that I can remember, I should say. I shouldn't say no, because not that I remember. And when you go into the pediatrician after you have your child and when you have your follow-up visits at your OB, they have you fill out a form. But at least from my experience, it's very check the box. This is part of our process. Okay, you're a new mom, do this. And it wasn't until several months into my postpartum experience that my OB commented, you might want to look into this. I'm not sure if my husband was with me at the time. He probably wasn't because I was very dismissive and poo-pooed it. But there was no alarm bell to anyone or no one saying, hey, there's a problem here.
Looking back on it, some of the common screens are the PHQ-9 for depression or the EPDS, Edinburgh postnatal depression scale. And one of those, I assume, is what they used,
Yes, I believe so.
something like that. Do you know, or did anybody explain to you like what the quote unquote score was for that?
Not that I remember. I do remember when doctors would talk to me, and again, this was the pediatrician as well as my doctor. They said, this isn't where it should be, or some sort of language in that vein, but it wasn't where, hey, we have a problem here and something needs to be done. At some point, someone at my OB's office had given me a slip of paper with a recommended therapist and said, you might
Mm.
want to make a call. But it was never a, hey, this is a priority. There's something not good happening. And
It's
my
really
husband,
hard to understand that if people are dancing around it. It makes, and almost minimizing it, of course, it's going to make you minimize it as well.
exactly. And I loved my OB experience. The practice is phenomenal. The people are phenomenal, like all of the things. They were responsible, and their main charge was bringing the baby into the world.
Mm.
Like they made sure that I had everything to be healthy during the pregnancy, and they safely got my child into the world and me
Mm.
into the other side of birth. And that's kind of where it ends, that the
Yeah.
rest of it is very much formality, and they're worried about the other people. And this is my interpretation,
Mhm.
that you are the vessel for the child. And once you are done vesseling and ushering that baby
Uh-huh.
into the world, okay, it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And it felt like I very much fell into this gray area, that I went from the OB to the pediatrician, and now the pediatrician is no longer concerned about me as a vessel, as
Mm.
OB wasn't, but the pediatrician is concerned with my child,
Right.
understandably. They're not my doctor. And there is this gap in servicing where
Yeah.
the birthing parent is out there on a limb. What do I do?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of guidance or resources given, or sometimes they do. Some people are practices are getting better, but I I think maybe this is your experience, but it's some if they're not trained, they don't know what to do, and so they don't do anything.
Yeah, they're going through the motions. They're
Hmm.
making suggestions, but they're very light touch. Like you
Hmm.
said, it's dancing around. That my pediatrician wasn't going to say, hey, this is something that really needs to be taken care of, because they're a pediatrician.
Hmm.
They're they can make suggestions, but I'm an adult. I have I can take care of myself, so to speak. And at one point, I think it was almost 6 months after my daughter was born. She was almost starting to crawl by that point. And it wasn't until that far down the road that my husband really got a sense of, okay, you're not coming out of this. It's only getting worse.
Oh, okay.
And he recognized it on his own
Mhm.
and had to be the driving force to make something happen. And in retrospect, I just now think, I'm sure there are tons of people out there that don't have that sort of support system for whatever reason. And again, knowing that individuals probably get caught up in the systemic issue of there not being
Mhm.
medical support for a post-birthing parent, unless you have a doula, which I did not have in that
Mhm.
capacity. So there was no one watching out for me.
Right.
And I have a wonderful support system. So I can
Mhm.
only imagine what others have gone through and continue to go through.
Yeah, for sure. It sometimes you get lucky, or I don't know what, maybe your husband did already know some signs or symptoms of depression, was able to catch on to that. But if people don't know, they can make all kinds of assumptions about even who you are, not even just what you're going through. It can
Exactly.
really go awry.
And I got to the point where it was so bad that I don't want to say it was obvious. It wasn't obvious to me at the time. But I had a C-section 12 weeks after I gave birth. I was still in a tremendous amount of pain. The stitches weren't healed. I still
Mm.
had trouble walking, and I couldn't run back to work fast enough.
Mm.
I had a roughly 6-month maternity leave, and I was like, okay, time to go back to work. Yeah, great to spend time with you all, and now I'm out. And I ran back to work because that was the world that I understood.
Sure.
It made sense
How
to
long
me.
post after birth did you go back?
12, 13 weeks.
Okay.
And that's more than a lot of people, and I want to
Hmm.
acknowledge that. But for me, the fact that I was privileged enough to have 6 months of maternity leave, and I was like, no, I don't want to spend that time with my child. I'd rather go back to my corporate job, and I would rather go back to meetings and spreadsheets and emails and
Hmm.
projects. Like, That's
things
a
that you
bit
know.
weird. Yeah,
Mm,
things that I knew and that I can
mm,
control,
yeah.
to be honest, in looking at it, that I understood that world. It made sense. I didn't understand why my baby was crying. I didn't
Mhm.
understand why I didn't want to spend time with her. And so I ran back to work. And even though I was working and functioning in at least a superficial way, that if you were to
Mhm.
see me in a meeting, you'd be like, oh, yeah, the
Right.
person is a new mom. They're doing fine. They're getting stuff done. I was to the point where I was getting up in the morning, rolling out of bed, opening my laptop, working for a full day until the sun went down, closing my laptop and crawling back into bed. That I
Right.
didn't want to spend time with my daughter, I didn't want to spend time with my husband, didn't have the energy to shower, which is interesting, but I didn't have the energy to take care of myself, but
Mhm.
I had the energy to do the career professional oriented things.
You made a point about that. That's something that you could control and specifically do. Do you have any recollection of how it felt to be working? Did it feel like relief? Did it feel like how would you describe it?
I would say everything at that point felt numb. So there was
Oh.
no difference in being with my family or being at work, but being at work, I was able to fake it. That no one was
Mhm.
treating me with kid gloves.
Mhm.
Every People cared, but they were that was my world of work. So just the attention was very different. And so feeling numb, I was able to fully propel myself into that environment. And I was able to almost switch on and switch off.
Yeah.
Like I was able to forget that I had a baby.
You had mentioned that not wanting to spend time with her. Did that feel like you were saying like that numbness, or did it feel, I don't know if avoidance would be the right word, but almost as it would be painful to think about doing?
I think I was angry
Mm,
more than anything else.
mhm,
That I have
mhm,
this vivid memory, and I don't have very many memories of my daughter's first 6 months,
mm,
which makes me very sad now to think back
mm,
on. But the couple of memories that I do have, one is my husband sitting on the floor with her in her bedroom playing, and he had the little clapper and he was making noise and she was cooing and everyone was happy. And I was just sitting there and I looked at her and I felt nothing but anger, that I wanted to be anywhere else but in that moment. And there was this tiny, beautiful, perfect little baby just looking at me.
mm,
And I couldn't get up fast enough to leave.
mm,
And my husband asked me, don't you want to hold her? Don't you want to play with her?
mm,
And again, very few memories, but I remember saying to him, I'd really like to go to bed. Like,
mm,
I don't really want to be here.
mm,
And the look in his eyes, that he just felt so sad.
mm,
And I could tell
mm.
he didn't know what to do. I
Right,
didn't know what to do.
right.
I knew I needed to get away. And my memories from those first 6 months are all pretty much like that.
In that during that time, was there I'm asking because sometimes people like will feel that anger and then feel like guilt right after, or like a kind of a what's wrong with me, or why can't I, or like a questioning of themselves. Was that in there?
I think, not I think, I felt just angry with myself that I was not meant to be a
Oh,
parent.
oh,
What type of mistake did I make? This poor
oh.
child that has been brought into the world, what type of mother does she have? Her
Mhm,
poor luck.
mhm,
And I was angry with myself for having made the decision to have a child.
mhm,
That to me, it was just proving that I was not genetically programmed
mhm,
to be a
mhm,
caregiver.
mhm,
And it was just a lot of anger and sadness, but at no point was it, oh, there's something wrong with me
mhm,
and that there's something that needs to be fixed, so to speak. It was more that I'm the problem. I knew this was going to happen. I knew I wasn't meant to have children. Again, going
okay.
back to this
Right, right.
idea that I wasn't always sure I would have children. So
Mhm.
for me, this was just a reinforcement of I had made the wrong decision.
I really appreciate you. Thank you for answering those questions. And I appreciate you talking about this because I think a lot of people have these feelings, don't know how to make sense of them for sure, or even like won't tell people that they're experiencing this because it's all encompassing or whatever. People have all kinds of experiences with their experiences. But for you to be able to talk about it, I know is something that a lot of people can resonate with because, like you were saying before, like you weren't glowing, but everyone tells you you're supposed to be. And likewise, people tell you're supposed to be happy and fulfilled at this point of having a baby. And if you're not, then you're not fitting those, the quote unquote societal standards or pressures or whatever. And it, nobody's told you how to deal with this.
Exactly. And I felt that I was failing everyone, including myself. And it just, it's suffocating.
Mm,
It's suffocating to feel like you can do nothing right. And that, yeah, that it was just, it was the worst feeling in the entire, I've never felt that low in my life. And it got to the point where I was like, my child would be better off without me. My husband would be better off without me.
mm,
He just, from my standpoint, took a natural, yeah, he's such a natural father. He still is.
mm,
That he was born to be a
mhm,
dad. And I was jealous.
mm,
I was jealous of how naturally it seemed to come to him, even though we were both sleep deprived and we
mm,
were both figuring it out. I was like, that's what it's supposed to be like for me. I carried this baby
mm,
for 9 months, and now what?
mm.
What comes next?
Yeah.
And I when no one was looking, I would sit on my laptop and I would look for cute little apartments in little towns.
Mm,
And I would say, okay, if I just went away, everyone would be
mhm,
better. That if I disappeared, I could have a quiet life somewhere. I could get a
mhm,
job in a shop, and
mhm,
everyone will be happier.
mhm.
And even that wasn't a, this is interesting. Maybe there's something wrong here that I live in New York City. I've always been very ambitious in my career. And all of a sudden I was talking about maybe I should just disappear.
Yeah. That's so hard with this is that it can feel so all-encompassing that the sort of fog that it brings with it for you to not be able to see that you're not feeling like yourself is part of depression. It just feels like truth.
It's an out of body experience in that way, that you're living it. And at the same time, you don't recognize yourself, but it does feel like a truth. It just
Mhm.
feels like this is the new normal. And it is terrifying.
For sure. With all of that, I'm sure there are a lot of other kind of details and things that went on for you. How did you kind of get out of it or find help?
My husband got to the point where he had to essentially threaten me and
Mm,
say that this is not tenable. There is something
mm,
wrong here. I think he had probably done his own research at that point and realized that it was postpartum depression, or it was something
yeah.
not normal or common
Mm,
that should be happening. And he started calling different psychiatrists and programs. And at one point, he said to me that he didn't know how our relationship would survive. Like he had to use that as
yeah.
a bait to say, okay, if you don't care about yourself, if you don't care about our child in that moment, he knew that I cared about us. So
Mm,
that was what he was able to dangle in
mm,
order to move things forward.
mm,
And at one point it was, you don't have to, he gave me a list of different providers and said, you can choose whomever you want, but you
mm,
have to choose somebody. And he had early introduction calls with most of them. But I didn't have the energy after I had finished working to be like, oh, yes, let me go online and look at
mhm,
reviews for providers when I don't even think I have a problem. And you want me to choose somebody. And so he had found, I said, if this is the requirement, like you choose and I'll have whatever conversations you want. And I was still convinced that there was no problem.
mm,
And I had an intake video call with a treatment facility here in New York, and it was very robotic. Like I was answering their questions, and looking back on it, I thought I was answering in a way that would check the boxes. Oh no, this person's fine, totally fine. And afterwards, I guess that was not the result. It
okay.
was like, how quickly can you start the
Wow.
program sort of situation? And it was no longer, even though it's a voluntary program for my relationship, it was no longer a choice. It was, you
Mm,
are trying this, because my husband didn't know how to help me. He
right.
knew that to help me, he needed to get me other help.
Wow. Okay. So that was like a big reality check.
Very tough pill to swallow.
For sure. And was it hard to, I don't know what the right word, I like hard to believe that, oh, these people think something's going on.
I was in denial. I thought it was not a pyramid scheme, but I was like, these people just want my money. They want my insurance,
Right, right,
that
right.
I'm easy bait because I just had a
Mm,
kid. And in my head, not everyone was against me, but it was, of course, they want another patient.
mm,
That's what they're selling. Of course, they would want to bring me in. And yeah, I, it took me probably until more than halfway through being in that program to accept that there was actually something wrong.
Oh, wow.
I
How,
just thought
how long were
everyone was
you in
lying.
there?
I think it was over 3 months, I believe. It was definitely long. I thought I was going to go in, and this is how naive I was. My husband said, "Okay, you're gonna try this out." I went in, whatever day it was. That did not go very well for me. I sat there completely mute the entire day, listening to everyone else introduce myself. And every time everyone introduced themselves, I was like, "I do not belong here. I do not belong
Uh,
here. How do I get out of here? This is not for me."
mm,
And I had stormed up to reception towards the end of the day, and I was like, "Okay, I'd like to leave now. What do I need to sign to get out of here? I do not
mhm,
belong here." And yeah, for well over the first half, I believe that I did not belong there. And at the very beginning, I thought, okay, like I can make this work for a week. Like I could
mm,
sit in a chair and pretend to care for a week and then
mm,
I'll leave.
mm,
It's like a mini little program. And I kept asking, so how long is this? What's the deal here? Is
mm,
it 1 week, 2 weeks? And it should have been very telling that everyone I spoke with said, oh, we'll see.
right,
Everyone's
right.
different. We'll see. And
Right,
that should have been my first clue that
right.
it was not a spa retreat for the weekend that you
Mm,
go in, get fixed and leave. And I had stormed out that first day. My provider at the time sat down with me, and I think it was the head of the program, and said, maybe you can reconsider. You don't have to sign the paperwork now. We'll keep it open, or whatever the
mm,
terminology they
mhm,
used was, and go home and think about it.
mm,
And I'm thinking, these people are absolutely insane. What is
mm,
there to think about? This
mm,
is not,
mhm,
I don't belong here. And I went home, told my husband, not for me. I'm good. Trust me. I sat there. I listened to other people's stories. I am fine. Like, you should be so lucky, sort of
mhm,
situation.
mm.
And he made the ultimatum and he said, okay, you don't have to go back tomorrow, but you can't stay here. It's like the closing time, like you
Yeah,
don't have
yeah,
to go
yeah.
home, but you can't
Yeah.
stay here situation. And he said, I don't care where you go, but tomorrow you cannot just power up your laptop and work. You cannot stay in the four walls of our apartment.
Mm,
You have to get out. And he said, oh, and I had to shower. That was
mm,
another
mhm,
requirement, which was
mhm,
actually quite hard.
mm.
And I thought about it all night, didn't sleep. But what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Just even thinking and making those plans
Oh
was
my gosh.
overwhelming. It was too
Yes.
much.
Yes.
And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to go get falafel. That was my big adventure out in New York City was to go get falafel. And so I did some Googling, found a place that it was in Lower Manhattan, and I showered in the morning. By the time I left my apartment, I was exhausted.
Mm,
Just the act of getting ready and
yeah.
showering, getting changed, doing the whole thing.
Yeah.
I took the train all the way downtown, found the falafel, sat in this random little shop having a falafel, looking at people, and then I was okay, now what do I do?
Mm,
I got out of the house, I completed, yes, check, check. I completed the assignment, but now
mhm.
what? And it was the middle of winter, it was ridiculously
Oh,
cold,
yeah.
and I decided to walk home. And this
Ooh,
was Lower Manhattan. It was like basically the tip of Manhattan.
yeah.
I that time lived on the Upper West Side.
Oh boy.
So for anyone who's not familiar with New York, that is quite the trek.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, I'm just going to start walking and see where that leads me.
Mm,
And I meandered through all of downtown, up Fifth Avenue. I was in Rockefeller Center. I sat on the floor in Herald Square when I got tired, and a police officer asked me if I was okay. I stopped in almost every Starbucks I saw along the way just to sit there and look
mhm,
out the window because it was cold
mm,
out. And I wound up on the steps of the Museum of Natural History, which is
mm.
quite, I'd already walked multiple miles at this
Right.
point, and I was counting pigeons. And
Mm,
I was just sitting on the steps looking at all the, because New York City, pigeons are
sure.
plentiful. One pigeon, two pigeon. And then as one would fly away, I would start counting again. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, I don't know what's wrong, but definitely is not right. And that was my aha moment.
Okay. Yeah. You don't know when that's going to come,
No.
certainly. Oh, so you went back to the program.
Yes.
How, when you finally realized that you did belong there or that something was wrong, what was the thing that helped you realize that?
I For me, it was definitely that I realized in the moment of and I use this as the true moment for me of counting pigeons. Like I did that for over an hour. I just
Mm,
sat
mm,
there
mm.
and I didn't even realize an hour had passed. That I realized that I was not functioning properly
Oh,
or
okay.
functioning at where I had been. That the fact that I was losing count of pigeons, the fact that I was so hyper fixated on these pigeons,
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah.
all of these things, it started to bubble up to me that, okay, this is an interesting scenario. And it was the first time in over 6 months where I had left my house in the capacity
Uh-huh. Yeah.
that I was being exposed to the outside world because I wasn't in control of my emails and my spreadsheets and my
Right.
meetings. And I put myself in this position for 6 months at that point where I could control everything. And it was easy to manipulate. And once I was, my husband doesn't know that he did this at the time, but he threw me out and I had to go function in the world without any guardrails. And that's when I was finally able to see a little bit through the fog, okay, I'm not me.
What in your process of progress of getting better, what were the things you noticed like coming back to you about yourself?
Very slow to return was my executive functioning. Little by little, being able to spend time with my daughter and finding joy in that,
Mm,
where it wasn't just a checklist item, okay,
mhm,
change diaper, give bath, give bottle.
mm.
It was, oh, let's play on the floor. And this was a very slow unfolding. It was
Right.
not a Monday I went into the program and the next Monday I was happy go lucky mommy. It was very slow. But just the routine of having to go physically into a program every
Mm,
single day, Monday
mhm,
to Friday, and to get ready in the morning and to take transportation and to
mhm,
force myself to walk from point A to point B and to
mm.
set a routine, that very slowly started to get me back into a get me back into a routine, and that's what started becoming easier for me, and just going through the motions.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean that process, by the time you, I guess, were done with the program or graduated out, what I'm curious, like, what is the kind of bridge from all that you experienced and your healing journey into your process with helping other parents? How did that happen?
The way that I've always been, and maybe other people, maybe particularly millennials could relate to this or in general, but I didn't grow up in a scenario where we talked about mental health, where it was out in the open. If you had something to deal with, you dealt with it and then you moved on. You got treated, you took care of yourself. It's like taking your antibiotic course. You take
Mhm,
it and then you don't keep talking about how you had strep throat. You move
mhm,
on with your life. And that's very much what I expected to have happen
mm.
in being treated with postpartum depression. I thought, okay, I graduate from this program, still waiting on my diploma. That has not yet come. And then all of a sudden you're better, you're in the world, you don't talk about it. Yes, I have this lovely little daughter, she's fabulous, this is her name, here's her picture. And it was not that smooth transition, even
Mhm,
after graduating and
mhm,
getting better, as they
mhm.
say. It was very much still a work in progress. And I wasn't able to sweep it under the rug. I wasn't
Right.
able to leave it behind me that because it had become such a defining feature in my life that
Mhm,
it had utterly shaken me to my core and made me question who I was as a person. And when I did try to forget it and move on, I realized that I was still unable to continue in my journey. I was unable
mhm,
to leave it behind. And little by little, I crept into different types of conversations when people found out I was a new mom, and it casually came up. It wasn't where I was like, hey, I had PPD. Would you like to
mhm.
know more about my experience?
Right.
But it came up in the conversation. And I realized how much lighter I felt after that.
Nice.
And the number of people who, and it wasn't a woe is me, like, hey, I went through this, feel bad for me. It was
Right.
no one had ever talked to me with birthing parents in particular had never said, oh yeah, becoming a parent was rough.
Mm.
Yes, they talked about sleepless nights, but no one had told me about this as a possibility. And
Right.
when I started to talk about it, the number of people, especially older women, who had said, yeah, I went through something similar. There
Mm.
wasn't necessarily a name back then, or the number of people who said, oh, yeah, I'm thinking about starting a family. And a lot of men in particular,
Mm.
I had no idea this was something that my partner could go through.
Mhm.
And people making comments like that made me realize me sharing my story wasn't about me anymore. It was
Mhm.
about this is something in our society that demands attention, and regardless of my particular experience and situation, this is going to continue. You
Right.
don't necessarily eradicate this from happening. You eradicate it by getting rid of the stigma and by
Mhm.
learning how to treat it and educating. And I realized that I could be part of that equation.
Cool.
And
Mhm.
that became a very exciting prospect for me.
That's amazing. So, what was the kind of seed of Beacon? Yeah, how did that develop?
So, my first pregnancy, that was my PPD experience with my first pregnancy. With my second pregnancy, I recognized earlier on that I had perinatal depression, went
Mhm.
back into an intensive treatment while I was pregnant. So, it was a very different experience.
Mhm.
Gave birth, did not have the PPD
Mhm.
experience, which
Mhm.
was amazing. But I started to put my puzzle pieces together. And my puzzle pieces were I felt very alone. I felt alone, not just as a new mom, but I felt alone as a human.
Mhm.
It was such an isolating experience for a multitude of reasons. And once I came out of it with my two amazing and beautiful children, I started to realize that is an epidemic beyond mental health. As an adult, it is hard to meet friends. When you add in the additional layer of being a caregiver, it becomes that much more challenging.
For sure.
And that was very much the seeds, the combination of me becoming an advocate and speaking out against maternal mental health, and then noticing that this isolation and this epidemic of loneliness,
Mm.
something that transcended maternal mental health and to all parents.
Right.
And I started having conversations with people at the playground who I'm sure thought I was off my rocker about their social lives and challenges as a parent. And the pieces really just started to come together. And that's what led to what is now Beacon, which is a playdate matching platform that's launching later this year and also a scheduling tool. So, thinking about not just finding your people, but also the mental load that goes along with scheduling and making things happen. Because as a
Right.
parent, you have so many things on your plate.
Yes.
It's not just about wanting to do something, it's about being able to follow through.
So, what will people like? How? Let me restate that. Sorry. Can you give us a glimpse into what the platform feels like or does? How
Absolutely.
it helps?
Yeah. So there are two facets to the platform. The first one is I don't have people. That's stated very bluntly, but like, I don't have friends in my area with kids my same
Oh, oh,
age.
got
I
it, got
don't
it.
have friends in my area who are available at the same time that
Mhm.
I'm available. I moved to a new location, or my dance card isn't full and I would love to be
Mhm.
able to meet more people. There are a lot of different scenarios that would fit that. So it's I'm an adult, I'm a caregiver, and me and my partner or whomever would like to meet other people with similar interests as us, who we are likely to hit it off as friends based on those interests, who have
Mhm.
children who are roughly the same age as my child or children, who are also available when we're available, and who live in the general proximity of where we live. So I think about it as this Venn diagram of you have your first circle, which is people who live in your area who
Mhm.
have kids the same age as your kids. The second one is they're available when you're available. And the third one is you have stuff in common.
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
actually want to talk to these people about things other than just your children, because
Right.
you like it's very easy to go to a playground and find some person to talk to for an hour, and
Sure.
you talk about your kids' bodily functions and how they slept last night. But then that very much puts you as your only identity as caregiver. And yes, that's an important part of who I am, but it is not only who I am. It is
Right.
just one facet of a very complicated person.
Right.
So being able to have friends outside of that, outside of my caregiver status, was very important. So that third circle is the stuff you have in common, and that itty bitty overlap in the middle is people who check all of those boxes. It's the trifecta of friendships for parents, which is very hard to come by.
Just,
Yeah. So the first part of Beacon is helping you find those people. And then the second part is once you find those people, how do you get together? So we help you schedule it, schedule those play dates. And also for individuals or families who have friends, their kids are already in activities, they're already in nursery school or kindergarten, whatever it is, going back and forth by texting. Hey, are you available on Saturday at 9? No, Joey has soccer practice.
right.
Okay, how about next Tuesday at 4? And this
Right.
goes on
It
and
sure
on.
does.
So being able to put in your family's entire schedule and then to connect with your friends on the Beacon app. And you could, within a couple of clicks, say, I want to get together with my friend Kat and her son. And oh, look, these are the times they're available. That matches with my availability. Click, 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 and book.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's so
And
cool. Because and what I love about it is it's exhausting to try and set that stuff up, and it's so easy to stop trying
that's
because
exactly it. Yeah.
it's just like, all right, I guess we're just all busy and or whatever. Like you get distracted. There's like a kid like puked or whatever. Like you have to go take
Hmm.
care of something, and then days later, maybe a missed opportunity. So I just love this idea. It's
Thank you.
cool.
We have over 1,000 families now on our wait list, which is national because the platform will be available nationally. And the third component, which is I used to live in New Orleans, so I like to say it's lagniappe. It's a little something extra, which is one of my favorite words.
Oh, cool.
But a little something extra for the platform is that we gamify it a little bit.
Oh,
So when you go on a play date, either with somebody we've connected you with or even your best friend down the street, you earn points.
oh,
And those
nice.
points can then be cashed in for discounts and product with our partners. So, from a little
That's
kid's
cool.
perspective, if you think you're probably going to be buying your kid new shoes at some point, wouldn't it be great to get a discount on those shoes you were already going to buy?
That's really cool. What a neat integration, right? It's something that people already want, but like psychologically speaking, a positive reinforcement goes a long way.
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Ah, that's really cool. I'm so excited. So when can, people can start signing up now?
Yep.
When does it go live?
We are targeting this summer to launch the application nationally. Anyone who's on the wait list will be able to get a sneak peek as we're going through everything. It doesn't cost anything to join the wait list. It's just, hey, we like the idea. Please keep in touch. And yeah, we're partnering with lots of medical providers. So think doulas, pediatricians,
Mhm.
even maternal or mental health providers, because the epidemic of loneliness is so systemic. And I think about when I was sitting in my daughter's pediatrician's office and when I didn't say it, but if I were to have said, "Hey, I'm so lonely. Is there a mom group? Are there parent groups? What can you share with me?" It would have been so lovely if someone could have said, "Have you heard of Beacon?" And Beacon, the main hook is not to just connect you virtually. It's not about having your virtual network. It's about actually bringing you out into the real world, which
Mhm.
now, and I'm thinking in real time, for me, that's what helped me to start healing with my postpartum depression journey, being
Right.
out in the real world and that forcing function. And
Mhm.
this is very similar. It's not about the safety net of being online, it's about those real world connections and experiences.
Super cool. It's so needed. You're filling a massive gap here, I think.
I
It's
hope
really,
so.
yeah.
And the initial responses have been overwhelmingly positive. And just to call out, this is not just a mom thing. So
Mhm.
25% of our wait list actually identify as males. It's moms, dads, it's caregivers. And if
Mhm.
you, the caregiver is the term that we use because you could have a very involved grandparent
Right.
or an aunt or an uncle. Everyone's situation looks different. And it's important to be able to build your village. Um,
Absolutely. And this is super cool. I'm really
Thank
happy
you.
for you, and I'm happy for all of the people who are going to benefit from this. It's really
Thank
awesome.
you. I
Yeah.
really appreciate that. And I don't want to say it was meant to be that I went through this, but and I hate to say I am happy that I went through
Yeah.
postpartum depression because I don't think anyone would actually say that. But I love that something beautiful is coming out of something that was really dark.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your story and all that you went through and your part of your healing journey with us. I know even just that is going to help a lot of people, let alone this
I'm
amazing
glad.
platform that you're building.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
To learn more, go to beacon.com. That's beekyn.com. And you can also connect with Alli on LinkedIn, where she's very active. And you can find her under Allison Kushner. I'm super excited for this platform to be launched and to take off. I think this is such a needed resource for parents. So I hope you go check that out. And after you're done listening to this episode, make sure you're either following or subscribed on whatever platform you're listening on so that you can get every single episode delivered directly to you as soon as they come out every Monday and every other Thursday. Search for Mom and Mine on your favorite platform, and there you go. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time.